All right, so um, today we're going to dive into a story you might remember from way back, the Iran-Contra affair.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to look at how a mission to free American hostages became like a political earthquake that almost took down a whole presidency.
Right.
It's crazy, right?
Hmm.
Secret arms deals, covert operations. We've got excerpts from the American Scandal podcast, and it's a wild ride.
Yeah.
And it's really relevant today, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what's often forgotten is this was all happening during the Cold War.
Right.
There was this constant tension, this fear of terrorism.
Yeah.
And that's like the context you need to understand the decisions they were making,
Yeah.
even if they seem, kind of questionable looking back.
Exactly. It really felt like the world could explode at any minute back then.
Yeah, yeah.
And for the U.S., it all kind of came to a head with that horrific Beirut barracks bombing in 1983.
Oh, yeah.
241 Marines killed just like that.
Terrible tragedy.
It was a wake-up call, for
Yeah.
sure. And you have Robert Bud McFarlane. He's a top national security advisor.
Mm.
Right. He had actually warned the Reagan administration about the security risks in Beirut,
He did.
pushed for stronger measures to protect the troops, but nobody really listened.
Yeah. His concerns were basically ignored. You can imagine how he felt knowing he tried to raise the alarm.
Right, like that weight of responsibility.
Absolutely, almost a personal burden to prevent future tragedies.
Yeah.
It's that classic tension between, the experts and the politicians. McFarlane was the expert. He had on-the-ground knowledge.
Right.
But the decision makers, well, they went a different way,
Yeah.
and it had devastating consequences.
It really did. And that sense of responsibility, maybe even guilt, really drove McFarlane's actions as things in the Middle East just kept getting worse.
Yeah.
He wanted to protect American lives, make a difference. And this is where things get really interesting.
So unlike a lot of those in Reagan's inner circle, McFarlane wasn't some wealthy power player.
Right.
He'd come up through the ranks, a career public servant, earned the president's trust through just sheer competence, dedication.
He was the ultimate insider.
Yeah.
But even with all that influence, there were forces he couldn't control. Like when the CIA station chief William Buckley was kidnapped in Beirut, it really highlighted the growing threat of Iranian-backed terrorism.
Absolutely.
And there was a desperate need to find some kind of solution.
Right. And McFarlane saw an opportunity. He wanted to open up a dialogue with Iran,
Okay.
maybe, find some common ground. He was a pragmatist, willing to consider all options. But the administration, they weren't ready for that kind of diplomacy.
They were very much stuck in that Cold War mindset. Iran was the enemy, end of story.
Yeah.
But then this radical proposal comes across McFarlane's desk.
A covert operation
Yeah.
to trade arms for hostages.
Wow.
It was a high-stakes gamble,
Yeah.
orchestrated by Israel, put Reagan in a real tough spot. He'd built his whole reputation on this strong stance against terrorism, you know?
No negotiations with terrorists.
Exactly. But now he's faced with this agonizing choice of uphold that principle or maybe bring American hostages home.
What a pressure picker. I mean, imagine the weight of those lives.
Yeah.
Right. And the political fallout, if he went back on his word.
Yeah.
It's a huge moral dilemma.
Huge. And then you have this internal power struggle brewing because, Secretary of State George Shultz and Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger, they're dead set against it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They saw it as setting a dangerous precedent, possibly illegal and likely to backfire.
So you've got this internal power struggle. You've got these moral considerations, legal questions, and the lives of American citizens hanging in the balance. It's a recipe for disaster.
It is. But you know what? Despite all that, Reagan decides to go ahead with the operation.
He does.
Yeah, he prioritizes the hostages, even if it means bending his own rules and going against his key advisors.
Wow.
It's a decision that'll come back to haunt him.
For sure. So the operation's a go. But even as it's moving forward,
Yeah.
McFarlane starts having some serious doubts.
Oh, yeah.
The Iranians keep changing their demands. The intermediaries seem real shady.
Right.
The whole thing feels like it's about to collapse.
He realizes they're dealing with forces they don't fully understand, with motivations that, aren't always clear. And it raises that question, was McFarlane naive? Or was he deliberately kept in the dark?
It feels like things are really spiraling out of control at this point.
They are. And to make matters worse, that first shipment of arms is botched.
Oh, yeah.
The Iranians get suspicious. The whole operation is thrown into jeopardy.
And that's when things get really messy. Right?
Yeah, because it comes out that the CIA actually had a burn notice on that Iranian intermediary, Manuker Ghorbanifar. They knew he was unreliable, maybe even a double agent.
Wow.
But that information never reached the top.
So not only is the operation failing, But it's clear there were some serious lapses in judgment, a lack of proper vetting. It's like the seeds of a major scandal are being planted.
Exactly. And the lack of proper authorization, congressional notification, huge red flag. It meant if this ever came to light, the legality of the whole thing could be challenged. And, well, that's exactly what happened.
But before the scandal breaks wide open, there's this whole other drama playing out inside the White House, right?
Yeah.
Don Regan, the new chief of staff, he's basically waging a war against McFarlane.
Oh, yeah. Reagan was a master of bureaucratic maneuvering, notorious for controlling access to the president. He saw McFarlane as a rival and would use any means necessary to push him out.
So McFarlane is caught between this failing Iran operation, a White House power struggle, and a president who's increasingly out of touch. It's like he's a pawn in a game he doesn't understand.
Right. And the stakes keep getting higher.
Yeah.
And it leads to that pivotal moment, McFarlane's resignation. It was a principled stand, but also felt like defeat. He tried to do what he thought was right, but it blew up in his face.
He walks away, convinced the Iran initiative is doomed. But little does he know, things are about to get even crazier. And that's a story for part 2 of our deep dive.
So McFarlane's out, thinks the whole Iran thing is going down the drain, but that's not the end of the story. It actually gets, well, even crazier.
Right, because you have Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North waiting in the wings, McFarlane's deputy. And North, well, he's a whole different animal. McFarlane was cautious, skeptical.
Yeah.
But North, he was bold, maybe even reckless.
Yeah, North really represents a very different approach to foreign policy. Decorated Marine, Vietnam veteran, he saw the world in black and white. Good versus evil, us versus them.
Right.
And he was willing to do whatever it took to win.
And for North, the enemy wasn't just those terrorists holding Americans hostage in Lebanon. He was also focused on the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, right?
Right.
Which brings us to the Contra part of Iran-Contra.
Exactly. The Contras, they were fighting to overthrow the Sandinistas. Reagan saw them as like a crucial defense against communism spreading in Central America.
Okay.
But there was a problem. Congress had passed this thing called the Boland Amendment,
Right.
which basically said the U.S. couldn't give military aid to the Contras.
So you've got North stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
The Iran operation is going nowhere. The Contras desperately need money, and Congress is watching his every move. What does he do?
Well, he comes up with this plan, and it's so audacious, so out there. It's like something out of a spy movie.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He decides to use the money from those Iranian arms sales to secretly fund the Contras.
Wow. Talk about thinking outside the box. This is a huge gamble, a secret operation, layers of secrecy, secret bank accounts, shell companies, intermediaries, a whole shadow war running alongside official U.S. policy.
It is, and for a while it actually worked.
It did.
Yeah, North kept the Contras going and even got a few more hostages released from Lebanon. It was like he was pulling off the impossible.
Like, you know what they say about secrets. They always come out eventually.
They do. And with Iran-Contra, it was just a matter of time before the whole thing blew up.
So what happened?
Well, October 1986, a cargo plane with supplies for the Confers gets shot down over Nicaragua.
Oh, wow.
One of the crew members, Eugene Hasenfuss, he gets captured, and he spills the beans about the U.S. being involved.
It's like a bomb went off.
It was. The story hits the headlines. Congress launches this huge investigation. North's whole scheme unravels. And the scandal, well, it engulfs the White House.
The fallout must have been huge.
Oh, it was massive. Reagan's image, this strong, honest leader, shattered. Public trust in the government, it just plummeted. A real political earthquake.
And everyone involved must have been scrambling to, distance themselves from the mess.
Oh, yeah. Reagan initially denied knowing anything about the money going to the Contras.
He did.
Yeah. But as more evidence came out, his denials became harder to believe.
It's like a classic example of plausible deniability gone wrong. I mean, Reagan might not have directly authorized it, but he created this environment where this rogue operation could flourish.
Right. His support for the Contras, his obsession with those hostages, it gave North the freedom to operate outside the law.
Yeah. And it raises these questions, right?
Yeah.
About how much power the president really has, about the dangers of secrecy and ambition. And at the center of it all is Oliver North.
This enigmatic figure, part hero, part villain.
Yeah.
And then North is called to testify before Congress and becomes a media circus.
Oh, I bet.
He portrays himself as this patriot, a soldier just following orders, even though those orders were secret and, illegal.
He said that famous line, didn't he? I was given a mission and I carried it out.
He did. A line that really resonated with some people,
Right?
but for others, it was a chilling reminder about the dangers of blind loyalty and unchecked power.
Yeah. North's actions really divided public opinion.
They did. Some people saw him as a rogue operative who went too far, a symbol of the government overreaching. Others saw him as a hero, defying the rules to protect America.
And that debate about North, about what he did, whether it was right or wrong, it still goes on today. He became a symbol of a really turbulent time in American history.
He did, and the Iran-Contra affair, it didn't just hurt Reagan's presidency and public trust, it also impacted U.S. foreign policy long-term. It made people realize the dangers of covert operations, led to more scrutiny of what the executive branch was doing.
It's a story that still resonates today, don't you think?
Absolutely. It reminds us how fragile democratic institutions are, how important accountability is, and that tension between national security and individual rights.
Yeah.
But in the middle of this political firestorm, what about Bud McFarlane?
Right, the guy who tried to walk away from it all.
Exactly. What happens to him?
Well, in a strange twist, he ends up being a key witness against North and others involved in the cover-up. He testifies about his role in the arms for hostages deal, expressing, deep regret.
McFarlane's testimony provides real insight into how the Iran-Contra affair happened. He gives this firsthand account of the decisions, the pressure, the mistakes, the moral dilemmas.
But even with all the investigations and hearings, there's still questions about Iran-Contra that haven't been answered. Like, how much did Reagan actually know? Was he really in the dark about the money? Or was he part of the cover-up?
These are questions historians are still debating today. And it's this enduring mystery, the feeling that we may never know the whole truth, that keeps people so fascinated by it.
It's just wild, how this whole thing could happen in a country that's supposed to be all about transparency and accountability.
It really is.
We're talking secret arms deals, covert operations, money going to a group that Congress specifically said, no way, you can't support them.
Right.
It's like a political thriller or something.
It really is. The Iran-Contra affair, it really shows that tension between security and freedom, especially when everyone's feeling like, a sense of crisis. When national security is on the line, things get blurry. Actions that are, supposed to be protecting the nation, they can stray pretty far from, how a democracy is supposed to work.
And as the investigation went on, it became clear that this wasn't just, a couple of guys going rogue.
Right.
It was a failure of the whole system, a breakdown of oversight.
Yeah.
Accountability. That's why it was able to go on for so long.
Absolutely. And that's why those congressional hearings were so important. You had figures like Oliver North, John Poindexter, even Bud McFarlane being grilled by lawmakers trying to figure out what exactly happened.
It was like a national drama playing out on live TV. The whole country was watching these powerful men being questioned, having to answer for their actions.
Yeah, it was quite a spectacle. North's testimony was really something.
Well, yeah.
He presented himself as this patriot, a soldier following orders,
All right.
even though those orders were, secret, often illegal.
And that line, right?
Oh, yeah.
I was given a mission and I carried it out.
Exactly. And it resonated with some people. Even as more and more evidence piled up against him, some folks still saw him as a hero, someone who was willing to go against the grain, fight for what he believed in.
But that's kind of a slippery slope, isn't it? The idea that it's okay to break the rules if you think you're doing it for the right reason, where's the line?
That's the question. And that's why this idea of accountability is so important in this whole thing. If we say that's okay, then what's stopping future administrations from doing the same thing? Going behind Congress's back, ignoring the law, all in the name of national security.
Exactly. And the debate gets even trickier when you realize that despite everything, Reagan never really faced any consequences.
Right.
He gave that speech on TV, admitted that mistakes were made.
Right.
But he insisted he didn't know about the money going to the Contras.
It left a lot of unanswered questions. How much did Reagan really know? Was he involved in the cover-up? Or was he genuinely clueless about what North was up to?
Questions that historians are still arguing about today.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes this whole thing so fascinating. It's a story about power, about secrecy, about the limits of what a president can do.
It is. But what's interesting is that the Iran-Contra affair, it doesn't fit neatly into those partisan boxes. It's not just a simple Democrats versus Republicans thing.
Right.
You see people on both sides wrestling with what this scandal means, thinking about the law, about morality, about presidential power.
It shows that these issues, they go beyond party lines. They get to the heart of what it means to be a democracy. A nation that follows the rule of law, that holds its leaders accountable.
Exactly. And as we think about this part of American history, I think there are some real lessons we can learn from it.
For sure. It really makes you think about the dangers of keeping things secret, about the importance of having checks and balances, of holding our leaders accountable, no matter what their political party is.
It reminds us that power, even in a democracy, can be abused. And those in charge, well, they have to be held to the highest standards.
Yeah. And it reminds us that even if you have good intentions, it doesn't make it okay to do whatever you want. Your actions can have consequences you never expected, consequences that can be really damaging.
And ultimately, it reminds us that we as citizens, we have to be engaged. We have to question our leaders, demand that they're open and honest with us, demand that they're accountable to us, the people they govern.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, haven't we?
We have.
From Beirut to the Iran-Contra scandal and everything that came after. We saw how something that started as a mission to save American hostages got tangled up with these secret operations, with political games. And in the end, it became a real test for American democracy.
It did. And at the center of it all, there's Bud McFarlane, the man who tried to walk away. His story, it's a warning, a reminder of what power can cost you personally, and how the choices you make, even in the shadows, can have a lasting impact.
So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep. Until next time.